Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 4 of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I'm your host, Pierce Redmond. So if you're like me and you live in New York City, over the past 12 years, most likely you've been inundated with a series of pretty terrifying little public service announcements, either on the train or on TV or the radio, and they go a little something like this.
Don't assume it was left by accident. If you see something, say something.
So yes, I am referring to the campaign, If You See Something, Say Something, which has been foisted upon the American public since 9/11, particularly in New York City. You cannot ride the subway, without hearing at some point this little announcement, if you see something suspicious, say something, and, basically then turning everyone into a bunch of terrified people who, cow in fear at the sign of a black bag anywhere. But a few months ago, or a month ago in July, a even more horrifying message began appearing in the New York City transit system, telling people this.
The NYPD wants to know how fast a deadly chemical could spread through the subway system. Jay Dow joins me now, live with much more on the next big threat. Jay.
Well, Tamsin, counterterrorism agents have long feared the allure of a soft target, regardless of whether it's a marathon or a wide-open public transportation system. The NYPD is now making a significant effort to not just prevent this kind of attack, but coming to terms with the fact that its best option may be to figure out the quickest way to respond to it. Gas, and lots of it, pumped into the crowded New York City subway system. We're not talking about another terrorist attack, at least not yet. But the NYPD wants to be prepared, which is why the department plans to conduct a controlled release of harmless gas into the underground tubes and stations this summer to learn how a poison gas would spread through the transit system in a real attack.
What the public will see will be perhaps as many as 200 detection devices. It'll be done on 3 non-consecutive days in July. Those days will be determined based on weather conditions.
Nick Casal is a former NYPD detective and former deputy director of counterterrorism at the MTA.
The subway system is a porous system. It can never be completely defended.
Casal's assessment of law enforcement's ability to prevent a terrorist attack in the subway system is not encouraging.
The subways, the marathons, or any large gathering will still occur. However, we can't take draconian measures. We could place undercover officers in the crowd. We could look at people. We could search packages.
But none of those precautions provide a blueprint for preventing this kind of terrorist attack. In fact, police in Tokyo were caught off guard in 1995 when a group of suspects released toxic sarin gas on several lines of the subway system. 13 people died, and some 50 others were injured. A 2012 federally funded report by the Mineta Transportation Institute explored more than a dozen attacks on public transportation. Like the Boston Marathon, underground rail stations are indeed soft targets. The report acknowledges the obvious. Quote, the enclosed subway system would have provided an ideal venue for a chemical attack.
The ability of a terrorist to discharge some form of contaminant in the system is very easy.
So this sounds blunt and it may sound harsh, but is this an exercise to roughly determine how many people could die and how quickly?
Yes, I mean, and this is not by any means the first time they've used tracer gas to make that determination.
This kind of airflow test has been conducted in other cities, but never on this scale. And New Yorkers will get a warning when the NYPD intends to release the harmless, odorless gas. Tamsin?
I know it's a test, but just thinking about it, it's hard.
It is.
All right, Jay, thank you so much.
Yes, that's right. The NYPD, in conjunction with the Brookhaven National Laboratory, throughout the month of July was pumping PFCs, which is a supposedly harmless gas, throughout 21 different subway lines in all 5 boroughs. And before these tests even took place in July, signs began appearing throughout the New York City subway system, in which they were, telling people about these tests. And the signs had the following quotes on them. The NYPD will release small amounts of harmless, colorless gas in 5 boroughs and 21 subway lines. This airborne non-toxic test is part of the NYPD's precaution against terrorist attacks. MTA customers are advised to stay calm. And this was followed underneath by a quote from the wonderful NYPD Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, saying that the NYPD works for the best but plans for the worst when it comes to potentially catastrophic attacks such as ones employing radiological contaminants or weaponized anthrax. And if that wasn't alarming enough, the picture in the upper left-hand corner of all of these signs depicted a man wearing a gas mask. Now, I'm not really quite sure why they would have a man in a gas mask when they're trying to comfort people by the fact that this is totally harmless and there's nothing to worry about. But, you might want a gas mask. I don't know. And, obviously this is part of some sort of, psyop, some sort of psychological operation designed, with the express purpose of terrifying the public into becoming obsessed with the idea that at, any moment they could be exposed to some sort of contaminant, of course, by the perpetual boogeyman that is Al-Qaeda or global terrorists, jihadis, or what have you. And this, of course, as I said before, this is, part of an indoctrination campaign that's been going on since 9/11, which essentially is designed to make everyone fear everyone, be it your neighbor or the mailman or, your family member or any man that wears a beard or any person that carries a black bag. And of course, and this was a similar tactic that was used during all the various Red Scares in the United States, where, we were all, or not me obviously, but the public was told to, fear the commies everywhere, and that there's probably a commie under your bed, and, don't trust Rick, he's a commie, definitely. And of course, this has only been intensified to a real fever pitch now in America, and especially here in New York City. The militarization of the police force in terms of combating the supposed boogeyman of terrorism is really just unprecedented in a major U.S. city. I think probably only comparable with the border region in Texas and Arizona, but especially Texas. But that's a whole other story right there. And, of course, the media and popular culture is no help whatsoever. There's just tons and tons of predictive programming that goes on with shows like 24 or Homeland or, all sorts of various movies that, just even the past couple movies, there have been 2 or 3 movies that have come out in the past couple months depicting the White House blowing up and terrorists everywhere. And this is designed to program us into, having a particular reaction and to think a certain way when something does happen, even if it is fake or orchestrated or what have you. But again, that's also for another episode. Now, leaving aside the fact that your chances of dying due to terrorism are around 1 in 9 million, in fact, you have a better chance of dying from choking on your own vomit or getting electrocuted accidentally than you do from being blown up by a terrorist or exposed to anthrax by a terrorist. Let's now shift our focus a little bit to the history of biowarfare, and in particular the United States government role in biowarfare experiments. We can take a quick look at a New Yorker article that was written December 17th, 2012. And I don't really encourage people to read the New Yorker, but this was a fairly good article. And this dealt with Colonel James S. Ketchum, who worked for the Army from 1956 until 1976. And he was an Army psychiatrist, and he was employed at Edgewood Arsenal. And his sole purpose for his pretty long time in the Army was in researching and developing various different biowarfare techniques and applications that the Army could use in order to fight the commies again. At his time in Edgewood, he exposed countless different Army personnel to all sorts of different biological and various psychotropic drugs. He experimented with LSD. He would inject people with PCP and tell them that it was, vitamin shots or something like that. And most of these subjects, now some of them were aware that they were going to be given some sort of drug, but many of them had no idea. And he did this, unwittingly to countless Army people. He later became more involved with, truly horrific biological agents, things such as BZ gas, which is a pretty horrific gas, VX gas as well. This went on for, decades. And in reading the article, he sort of boasts about this. He doesn't really hide it whatsoever. And he kept copious notes and diaries about all of his various experiments. He was constantly getting in trouble, or was, close to losing his funding from the military. And in the end, almost all of his experiments really proved nothing. They proved that, yes, you could, inject someone with LSD and get them really, really high, but that was pretty much about it. And the same thing with BZ gas and all these other things. They, in the end, really proved pointless and useless. In the article, they document one particular case where they simply just released this massive cloud of BZ gas at one of these Army facilities. And, what they really learned was that, once you release that gas, that's pretty much it. There's no way you're really going to be able to control this whatsoever. So with most of these biological units within the U.S. military, they really truly are pointless. You can release a gas, but you're not really going to be able to control this. So in the end, what Colonel Ketchum really did was just ruin the lives of hundreds and hundreds of Army personnel. Many of these people suffer memory loss, they suffer schizophrenia now, a whole host of really horrible, damaging illnesses. But now let's move on more to the sort of experimental biowarfare tests that are done on regular people. Because, for whatever you want to say, you could say, well, these people in the Army, they did sign up to be in the Army, so they had to have known something. And let's look at a pretty good article that James Corbett wrote a few years back entitled Governments and Biowarfare, A Brief History. Of course, I'll provide all of these links in the show notes, and I'd really suggest reading this article because, while it is fairly brief, it is very concise, and it really demonstrates the history of the United States biowarfare experiments, in particular on average citizens. And I'll just read you the highlights of this, and he documents a few different cases throughout history in which people were unwittingly exposed to various different chemical agents. And the first of these that he documents is back in 1932, and this was the Tuskegee syphilis study. And this is a pretty famous study in which 200 black men diagnosed with syphilis are never told of their illness. They are denied treatment and instead are used as human guinea pigs in order to follow the progression and symptoms of the disease. They all subsequently die from syphilis, their families never told that they could have been treated. And as I said, this is a pretty famous one. Then we've got in 1950, quote, in an experiment to determine how susceptible an American city would be to biological attack, the U.S. Navy sprays a cloud of bacteria from ships over San Francisco. Monitoring devices are situated throughout the city in order to test the extent of infection. Many residents become ill with pneumonia-like symptoms. 1955, the CIA, in an experiment to test its ability to infect human populations with biological agents, releases a bacteria withdrawn from the Army's biological warfare arsenal over Tampa Bay, Florida. 1956, U.S. military releases mosquitoes infected with yellow fever over Savannah, Georgia, and Avon Park, Florida. Following each test, Army agents posing as public health officials test victims for effects. 1965, prisoners at the Holmesburg State Prison in Philadelphia are subjected to dioxin, the highly toxic chemical component of Agent Orange used in Vietnam. The men are later studied for development of cancer, which indicates that Agent Orange has been a suspected carcinogen all along. And, brief side note there, Agent Orange was developed by Monsanto, which is a chemical company which now purports to be a foodstuff producer, and they've brought us such wonders as GMO, corn, and soy, and a whole host of other things. All right, moving on. 1966, U.S. Army dispenses Bacillus subtilicis throughout the New York City subway system. More than 1 million civilians are exposed when Army scientists drop light bulbs filled with bacteria onto ventilation grates. It's eerily similar to what's going on just recently in New York City. 1990. More than 15,000 six-month-old black and Hispanic babies in Los Angeles are given an experimental measles vaccine that has never been licensed for use in the United States. CDC later admits that parents were never informed that the vaccine being injected into their children was experimental. 1994. With a technique called gene tracking, Dr. Gary Nicholson at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, discovers that many returning Desert Storm veterans are infected with an altered strain of Mycoplasma incognitus, a microbe commonly used in the production of biological weapons. Incorporated into its molecular structure is 40% of the HIV protein coat, indicating that it had been man-made. So there, right there is just a short but pretty terrifying history of biowarfare being used by the United States government. And I bring this up only to just reinforce the idea that while you can have Ray Kelly, you can have all of these people telling you that there's nothing wrong with them pumping a gas which disrupts endocrine production in women and causes women and girls to go into menopause. You truly just shouldn't believe that. And as you can see, there is a long history of the U.S. testing biological agents on regular people. It's not hard to imagine that if this article were to be updated, there would be a post for 2013, NYPD releases harmless gas, and it turns out that many people get sick or die. In fact, there was even a New York Times article that was written around the time of this called "Plenty to Say About Subway Test Gas That Isn't Seen." And most of the article is sort of dismissing these claims that this is some sort of dangerous thing and, oh, come on. The police commissioner said this is fine. There's nothing to worry about. But in the article, they take what they claim is a joke from a man on Twitter who says, "See y'all at the class action lawsuit 10 years from now." It really isn't a joke, though. These sort of things do happen. I mean, the case of the U.S. Army dropping this bacteria in the New York City subway system, which infected tons and tons of people, is evidence of this. And this went on, and they weren't even told. I guess now we've progressed as a society where they tell us that they're going to expose us to harmful chemicals, but, that's it. Just following up a little bit on this article that James Corbett wrote, there is also the case of these sort of false flag bioterror operations. And this has happened, several times. And many of, things such as hoof and mouth, which plagued England in the early 2000s. And in fact, that could have possibly have been some sort of false flag bioterror operation. And the Sunday Express reported in April of 2011 that the outbreak of hoof and mouth that was killing thousands and thousands of cows and destroying the livelihoods of countless farmers, this came on the heels of an audit of Porkins, which is a top-secret government bioweapons research facility. In this facility, they house things such as TB, anthrax, smallpox, and God only knows what else. But in this audit, they found that there were several vials containing the foot and mouth, they were missing. They couldn't find them. And at the time, the powers that be said, oh, this is just a mistake or whatever, and then they suggested that some sort of animal rights group had stolen these samples and then used them later. Of course, they never really explain why animal rights activists would steal foot and mouth and then expose them to animals, which would result in murdering all of these animals. But whatever, we don't really need to go into that. And it's not even just the United States. We can look at all sorts of different governments. In particular, a really truly chilling one has to do with the apartheid governments in South Africa and in Israel as well. The apartheid government in Israel, South Africa obviously no longer, but they were, and Israel still is, developing and producing various chemical agents that could be used on particular races. So obviously in South Africa, the white apartheid government wanted to use this against the indigenous black community, and in apartheid Israel, they are developing some sort of strain of bacteria that would only affect Arabs, Palestinians. So just another chilling example that this goes on all the time. And if you think that this sounds a little bit far-fetched or ridiculous, in September of 2000, the think tank Project for a New American Century, which is a bunch of neocon warmongers, essentially, they wrote a policy paper called Rebuilding America's Defenses, and in that there was the following quotation: "Advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a politically useful tool." And Project for a New American Century, or PNAC, has the following members: Cheney, Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Jeb Bush, Scooter Libby. So, these are really wonderful, upstanding human beings. And in there, they are openly talking about creating a type of biological agent that would target specific genotypes. Now, I'm pretty sure we can posit a guess as to what genotypes are going to be affected, mainly Muslims and basically everyone else, Africans, Latin Americans, and so forth. And just to leave you with one other aspect of the bioterror, false flag stuff, and just this phenomenon of the American government using bioterrorism over and over again. And this is sort of along the lines of the foot and mouth problem in England. But we had the anthrax attacks that happened shortly after 9/11. Now, we're kind of going deep into the memory hole here, so I'm sure people are going to be a bit confused, and this is a very complicated, long story. But essentially, we had these anthrax-laced letters that began showing up in the offices of different senators and media personalities. And at the time, they all were predominantly anti-Bush or anti-war on terror, or they were political rivals. So already we've got to think about that for a second, and why is that happening? But as this, sort of story unfolded very, very slowly, it became quite apparent that this was not, in fact, Al-Qaeda, and that instead, when all of these anthrax spores were later tested, they were all marked with a, sort of genetic marker that when traced back, these came from Fort Detrick, which is the military facility that houses the most sophisticated weaponry when it comes to biowarfare or chemical agents. Later, it came out that the Bush administration, at least since the morning of 9/11, for sure, they had been taking Cipro, which is the anti-anthrax drug. So again, you've got to really, don't just take whatever the corporate media is telling you, you need to look into this. Why is the anthrax that is being sent to people like Tom Daschle and others, why is this being traced back to a elite military facility in the United States? And, why is this not being tracked back to some Al-Qaeda guy in a cave in Afghanistan? And then, in fact, why is the Bush administration taking Cipro on the morning of 9/11? Did they know something that we didn't know? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. Just to leave you with one last bit, and that's just kind of to sum this up. But what does this all mean? Why should we be concerned with bioterrorism? Why should we be concerned when the New York City Police Department starts pumping gas into the subway systems? First and foremost, just the simple fact that we have documentable evidence, as I've pointed out, that the U.S. government has time and time again released agents that have turned out to be extremely dangerous. So to just assume because you saw a sign in the subway system that told you that this was okay, you shouldn't just forget about that. And, I freely admit I rode the subway during July constantly. And so did my friends and families and neighbors and loved ones. They were all riding the subway. And so, we were all sort of exposed to this. As I said, you shouldn't just take the government line that this is all safe. Now, the second aspect of this, and this is a bit more complicated because it really gets into sort of the psychological aspects of the war on terror. But the constant fear-mongering that goes on in the form of if you see something, say something, or the constant drills and tests that we're being inundated with, these are designed to keep us in a perpetual state of fear. And you can't let these things terrify you. And again, I freely admit, I'm on the subway all the time, and I see some weird-looking guy holding a strange bag, and for a moment, I kind of have to stop and say, is that a terrorist? What is that? You know what I mean? And as I said, your chances of being blown up by a terrorist are basically zilch. It's not going to happen. It really doesn't happen. But instead, it does create this sort of mindset where you're always afraid and you're always questioning everything, and you really can't trust anyone. And it turns you basically into a type of person where the only person or group that you can trust is the state, is the government. They're the only ones that are looking out for you. And that's why they're running these drills, and that's why you need to get pat down at the airport. You need to let your child get groped by some TSA goon. That's why, the NFL now is no longer allowing backpacks into their stadiums. This is why, all sorts of different things. This is why we have militarized police on every corner in New York City and in major, areas where people congregate, Grand Central, Union Square, things like that. But these are designed to perpetuate the state, to perpetuate the security state, the intelligence apparatuses, the military-industrial complex. These are all designed so that they can maintain their powerful grip on basically all aspects of society. And the biowarfare one is a big one, and this is something that we really need to be more aware of. And it doesn't just apply to biological agents being released unsuspectingly to see what would happen, how many people would die. This happens, as we said before, foot and mouth. This has happened with some of the recent strains of bird flu or swine flu, and then what happens after something like that happens? Then you get all of these draconian food safety regulations passed through, and of course you see the pharmaceutical companies and their cronies making a shitload of money off selling drugs designed to prevent flus that might have been made in a lab. With that, I think we'll leave it there, and thank you again for joining me for Porkins Policy Radio, and I'll talk to you very soon.
down to the river of Jordan. Oh yes, I'm going down to the river of Jordan some of these days. I'm going down to the river of Jordan. I'm going down to the river of Jordan some of these days. I'm going to eat at the welcome table. Oh yes, I'm going to eat at the welcome table some of these days. I'm going to eat at the welcome table. I'm going to eat at the welcome table some of these days. Heavenly choir, oh yes, I'm gonna sing in the heavenly choir some of these days. I'm gonna sing in the heavenly choir. I'm gonna sing in the heavenly choir some of these days. I'm gonna put on the silvery slippers, oh yes, I'm gonna put on the silvery slippers some of these days. I'm gonna put on the silver slippers. I'm gonna put on silver slippers some of these days. I'm gonna sit down by my Jesus, oh yes, I'm gonna sit down by my Jesus some of these days. I'm gonna sit down